The only way to really understand change is to have a clear idea what system you're looking into. Because different systems change differently, and they show different patterns of change. And when you combine all these systems together, it becomes very interesting. So for the purpose today, I really believe that there are two specific systems that we really want to look at. The top one here is kind of the changes that we typically see on the human scale, and social scales, and in nature. There's a tendency to, it's a cyclical trend, an ebb and flow. You go a little bit too much that way, and there's like a midpoint that pulls you back, and then you kind of drift off a little bit this way, and then you go back again. It's a natural rhythm. It's everywhere. If you look at it, even economic cycles, even long economic cycles. There's been several theoreticians who have operated with these waves, these archetypes that tend to repeat themselves. The Russian economist Nikolai Kondratiev was talking about the long waves in the economy, where you have different paradigms of industrial revolutions. Another one of my favorites, her name is Carlota Perez, and she's talking about industrial technology, techno-industrial paradigms, where one way of producing things and allocating money, it tends to kind of flow institutionally and technologically together until it doesn't work anymore. I know Strauss and Howe were mentioned earlier today. Those are some of my sort of main theoreticians into how I view generational change. And if you really look at it, there's been like an 8-year cycle since, the last time we had a big recession, since you had this, very polarized political landscape. We have, there's a huge volatility in the economic environment worldwide. We're even wondering if we're going to go into a new global recession again. So that is the typical cyclical, pattern that we'll see. But then we're dealing with technological change and some other changes that are on a completely different scale. This is Ray Kurzweil down here. Some of you might be familiar with him. And some of you might have heard about Moore's Law. Moore's Law was concocted back in the Stone Age of the computer at Intel from Gordon Moore. And what he realized was that the number of transistors that you can fit on an integrated circuit would double about every other year. I wanted to put the technology curve together with the generational cycle. If you look at the kind of peak of the generational cycle there, you can think of that as the recession. Then it's dropping down to a complete fall in institutional trust. We're at the end of a cycle. We're in what we call a crisis era. You can call it a fourth turning. There's a gap between where we are institutionally and where our technologies are really starting to take off. What can possibly go wrong? So, right now, whether you talk about photovoltaics and the changes in battery, the storage capacity for renewable energy, when you talk about artificial intelligence, when you talk about the zettabytes of data that we just have out there, we're really now at that point where it's really starting to take off. And again, we have to combine that with a generation who we have heard today is not so happy with the old system anymore. This old system is broken, so they're ready to start something new. This fourth industrial revolution is so immersive and so globally changing everything we do, how we live, how we work, how we relate to one another, how we get born, how we die, how we pray. Everything we're going to be completely defined by the technological and institutional changes that are going to adapt to it. So this was back in a few weeks ago in the World Economic Forum, where they're really starting to discuss these issues. And obviously, I wouldn't be able to go into every single technology. But if we kind of look at how it's disrupting media, I work on a very cross-industrial basis. So there's hardly a week that goes by without, there's a new client that approaches me with a request. And every time I hear the words millennials and disruption, millennials, disruption. And it's these big companies that are really starting to worry that they are being disrupted from the outside, that they're completely falling apart, that their reason for being is falling apart. And this is happening in so many industries at the moment. Now, usually what I tell these companies is that if you really want to look at an industry that has already some track record of being disrupted, please look at the media industry. So I can't really say that here because you are the media industry and you have been disrupted for a while. Now, why is that? If you read a book from Jeremy Rifkin, he recently wrote a book called Zero Marginal Cost Society. You will see that the communications internet and the changes that we're seeing in the communications internet is starting to lay some foundations of the changes that we're going to see in the physical world around us. So you are actually the harbinger of the changes that are coming. What that means, for one thing, is that we see these P2P flat platforms. It's very popular these days to say, what is the Uber of this or the Uber of that? I think we could rather say that Uber is the YouTube of the transportation industry. Because really, when you think about it, these peer-to-peer platforms and how these new communications patterns are starting to happen, they are peer-to-peer. They've been peer-to-peer for quite a while in the media industry, and you are the ones who are really feeling it more than longer than any of these other industries. I know it's disrupting, especially advertisement-based business models are starting to really wonder how we're going to survive this. Also, we have, and I don't need to really go into this co-creation and do-it-yourself. I think we've already covered a lot of that today. This is a generation that really wants to be heard and wants to be part of the final product. And they want a customized experience. They want a customized product. There's really two ways that you, for sure, that you can customize, individualize a product for them. One is to invite them into these platforms like Nike ID has done, where you basically have the shoe, but you put your personal twist on it. Or, you go and buy your Coca-Cola and there's your name on there. So that's one way of getting a customized, personalized product. The other way is to use computer algorithms. And this is where we're going into, creepy territory. A lot of people think this is really creepy because it means you have to have a lot of data about people so that you can give them a product at the end of it. And millennials and younger generations, it's not that they share everything, all their content willy-nilly. They have a much more conscientious idea about what they're sharing and why. So they will share more content in social media, but they will have a much more filtered approach to it. And one thing we noticed was that they tend to look at their personal data as commodity, as currency. So, okay, I share my content with you, but I expect you to give me a customized product back. And these are starting to go outside the transistor box for radios. They're starting to go into all of these wearables and VR glasses and all of these different media we have in our environments. So it's kind of shifting the environment. We have to stop thinking about content and what kind of media, but kind of think that this is going to be all pervasive everywhere. So, is there no role for the old industry, for the old media industry? It can sort of look like it, that these old institutions no longer have the same sway over their market as they used to have. I don't know. That's my job. My job is to try to help everybody find their role in society, and I think it's just being adaptive. I think there are different approaches. One thing is that you have to stay in their digital orbit. Again, a lot of people feel that this is very creepy territory, but you have to be in their data cloud. You kind of have to get You have to do emotion analytics. You have to do market basket analysis to see what did you listen to last. Well, let me see if I can come up with an algorithm that tells you what I think you might like. Where do you live? Okay, let me see if there's an event that's going to happen around your zip code. These are these little strategies that you have to use in order to stay relevant on the individual level. Mind the gap. Mind the happiness gap. So while this generation was kind of born on a surge, where they were told that the sky's the limit and you get a trophy for showing up, and then they hit reality, and guess what? They hit the heads on the debt ceiling long before reaching the sky. So there's a huge gap here between expectations, or the expectations that once were, and the reality we have now. So, should we just fill that with happiness? Well, maybe not. I remember back even when my oldest one was a child, Barney was big, and he was singing about these gumdrop and lemon drops and, raining, and everybody was so happy. And I thought it was so lame. And now millennials are becoming parents, and they take their children to see Inside Out, where sadness wins. I don't know if anybody have children here and I've seen it, but the whole concept is that you have a full range of emotions, and we're not happy all the time. Sometimes you actually need the sadness. But what you do need, you need something to fill that gap between, you need something meaningful. And here's where I do think that faith-based radio has a role to play. Because it is true that religion is one of those institutions that they're leaving in droves, but they didn't leave their spiritual needs behind. So if there's a way that you can connect to the core with those core needs, just like Matt just was talking about, you connect with their needs, where they are, then maybe there's a big role to play. Facilitate conversations, stop talking so much to them, talk with them, and better yet, facilitate the venues where they can talk to each other, whether that's digital venues like this. This is my oldest daughter. She's absolutely hooked on Musical.ly. Or offline venues, as we have an events that several people have talked about, and they know much more about that than I do, so I'm not going to go into detail about that. But again, it's away from the hierarchy and the authority, and it's facilitating the networks and using those networks' effects as much as you can. And then finally, follow them into their new life stages. And it is true, they're not getting married as much, they're not reproducing to the same extent, but 90% of all babies being born today are born to millennials. So they are entering a new territory. And you know what? When they're with us, we're going to invite them into the ranks of the zombie. Thank you for having me.